Genesis 18, studying the life of Abraham and how that promise fits in to the entire Old Testament and New Testament. It says after God made this promise that Sarah would have a child, Abraham lifts up his eyes and he looks, and three men were standing in front of him. And these men come and visit him, messengers from God. And in essence, they come to him. You can read this, and they say, "You're going to have a child. This is really going to happen." And it says that Sarah laughed to herself, and she said, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old," speaking of Abraham, "shall I have pleasure? Shall I have the pleasure to have children?" And it says that the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old?'" Is here, verse 14, this is so good. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Right? This isn't Abraham's doing. This isn't Sarah's doing. This is God's doing, right? He says, "At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." And you can read this for yourself, but it's so rich, and it's really indicating that this is a faith thing, a promise thing. This isn't something that Abraham gets any credit for. Verse 19 says, "For I have chosen him," Abraham, "that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised to him," what God has promised. So I wanted to point this out because we just got done reading Galatians, where Paul draws the distinction between the law and the promise. It is about the promise that God made and God's ability to keep his promise. It's not about Abraham's ability. If you're a follower of Jesus, it's because of God's ability to inspire you through his Holy Spirit to do righteousness and justice. It's not your ability. It's not to your credit. It is all God's work in you. He started the work in you, and he's going to complete it in you, just like he did this thing in and through Abraham and Sarah, even though they were as good, their bodies were as good as dead, as we're going to see in Romans when we get there in a little bit. Now, at the end of 18, we see we begin to pivot to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can read that for yourself. Abraham is going to intercede for Sodom because, remember, Lot lives there, his nephew. And so you can read that for yourself, and then we'll return to what happened there in the next chapter. But you're ready now to read and journal on Genesis 18. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 19.